So, even though you are not going to be using a technical pen, ergo a traditional technical pen for this particular project, I am going to cover technical pens just so you have some kind of exposure to it. And hopefully, when we get to illustration class, we'll be able to actually make use of the technical pens that we have in the lab. It is a wonderful there's nothing like a technical pen. A technical pen can make a line like nothing else in the world. And it is a wonderful illustration tool for a traditional medium. And there really isn't anything like it on the computer, even if you are using any of the natural media applications. There's a certain texture and roughness to it, but such a precise line. There's nothing quite like it. So these are some different pens. There's lots of different pens out there. We're scrolling through a couple different sheets talking about pens and the contents of their pens. There are several different brands out there, and I'll discuss them when we actually get to the point of the video where we're actually using the pen so that you can actually see what each of these different brands might look like. And then we're going to get actually to the hard part of the pen, the actual pieces of the pen. This is a chart showing you the different parts of the pen, with it closed on the left with the cap, the pen holder, and the base cap, just something to keep it closed on one side. Generally, the top cap on the very, very top, which isn't marked on this particular chart, is color-coded to the size of the nib that you happen to be using, because there are specific colors for specific sizes depending upon your brand. It's just something the industry got together with and went ahead and determined. And what you'll find is that if you look in the middle part of the chart, the nibs are also color-coded to match the caps, and are color-coded based on how wide a line they actually produce. And we'll get a little bit deeper on it, but if you see all the grooves on the nib, those are actually air channels, because in order for ink to come out of the pen, air has to be able to get into the pen. Otherwise, you end up with a vacuum, which doesn't work well for ink to come out. And nibs come in different materials. What you need to understand is that paper is one of the most abrasive substrates in the world. It's right up there with sandpaper as far as how hard it is on things. That's why scissors that are used with paper tend to get very, very dull quickly, because paper is very abrasive. And it's the same with these nibs. The metal nibs, depending upon how much you use your technical pen, and certainly if you were a draftsman or an architect, or even a full-blown illustrator with these things, you will end up wearing out the nib. Because you're rubbing it across a substrate that eventually is going to wear it out. Now, there are heads that are resistant to that, and those are called jeweled heads. I personally have some of those. They tend to be a little bit expensive to come across, and they are generally something like an emerald. And the idea is that the smooth surface of an emerald is less abrasive, has less friction than the stainless steel of the normal nibs. Okay? It all depends upon how much you're going to end up using them. Now you can see the pen body that the nib goes into. It screws into that. Okay, and that actually holds the nib in place. And then the ink reservoir goes on the back side. Now, this is basically a Staedtler pen that you're looking at right now, a Marsmatic Staedtler 700. That's what this illustration is kind of representing, which was one of the better brands that was available. It wasn't the cheapest, but it was one of the better brands. And now the different brands will have different ways of getting in things, but they're all basically the same components. Then if you look on the far right-hand side, you can see the nib, with the inner parts of the nib removed. Basically, you can unscrew the retaining cap and the plunger comes out of the bottom of the nib. I do not recommend this unless you are very, very comfortable with technical pens, because if anything happens to that cleaning tube, you are done. That nib is done. You might as well forget it. It's as bad as dropping the pen on the floor and bending the nib. It will never work right. But sometimes a pen gets dry and the plunger actually gets stuck inside of it. And that's why when you take a technical pen, if you rattle it, you should be able to hear that plunger move up and down. That means the pen is still loose and probably clean, or at least the ink inside is still liquid. Okay? Again, it's not a very good thing to take apart. And you don't need to take it that far apart to normally clean it. And then the bottom, not all of the pens, but the Staedtler Marsmatic 700s do have a wrench built into the bottom of the pen, basically the bottom of the pen holder, so that you can unscrew the nib from the pen body. Okay, so those are the general components. Some of them have retaining collars that the Staedtlers don't. They use friction to actually hold the ink reservoir in place. And they do make disposable ink reservoirs where you just put on a new reservoir when you want to put new ink in it. And we're going to talk about inking, putting ink in it and all that other good stuff when we actually start to get in there. Now, the next slide is gives you an idea of the components all next to each other. This one happens to be a Rapidograph, I think, or a Koh-i-Noor, one of those brands. I think there's probably 5 different brands. It has a different kind of reservoir, and you can see the collar on it. And you can also see the clamp rings. And then they also have specific rings for color coding that match the color of the cap and match the color of the nib, which has to do with how thick it is. Okay? Now, when we... there's lots of different methods. The more current methods and the methods that we're going to be using later on when I actually do the demonstration specific to the letter form, Microns are a very, very good brand. And so is Uniball, and so is Sharpie. And generally it's a good idea to have a variety of pen sizes, depending upon what you're going to do, but it's not a bad idea. And they do give highly refined lines, and they are generally about the same thicknesses as normal Tech pens. The difference being is their line is not nearly as crisp, okay? Because it's basically, well, it's more like a marker more so than an actual pen. And they tend to dry out, and they tend to not be treated really well, and you can't clean them like you can a technical pen. Now, you can see a Rapidograph Koh-i-Noor on top, well, kind of near the top, and you can see how crisp the line is compared to the other two. And then the third one is a brush pen, which is also available from Micron. And I don't know if Sharpie makes a brush pen yet, but those are great for creating kind of more of a calligraphic feel to it. Okay, so depending upon what kind of line you want. Generally, a Tech pen will give you the most refined, but maybe that's not what you're looking for. Now, technical pens require that you do some serious maintenance. They need to be cleaned. You never want to leave ink in a technical pen more than, say, a week or 2 weeks. Because the ink is going to start drying up. Even though they're designed to not dry up, they will dry up. It's just a natural thing that happens. This happens to be the squeezy ball kind. I'm just going to call it the squeezy ball because I don't remember. It looks an awful lot like the cleaner squeezy ball things for ears, okay? But this allows you to actually screw the nib into the black portion there and press cleaning fluid, force cleaning fluid through it. And then you can turn it around and suck cleaning fluid back through the other way. And you can see the little jar of Koh-i-Noor Rapido Ease cleaning solution, which won't last you very long if you're going to be doing a lot of pen work. Okay. If you are going to be doing a lot of stuff with these pens or even calligraphic pens, it's a good idea to get something a little more substantial. This is a big jar of pen cleaner. It will probably last me a lifetime because it's a lot of cleaning fluid. It's a very small amount goes in and gets heavily diluted by warm water. But it's certainly much bigger than the squeezy ball one that comes in that little tiny jar. It's just a little more functional. Now in the lab, we actually have two different kinds of cleaner. Now these are ultrasonic cleaners, and these are very, very necessary if a pen gets dried, or if you buy used pens and they are in bad shape. You are going to need to use these. Now, some of them use heat, some of them don't. Some of them actually generate heat simply because they're vibrating so much that the friction causes it to actually warm up. Now, this one also has two different ways of putting the nibs in. There's the little basket that holds the nibs, and then there's also the center of the basket, which is where you can put all the other stuff. Generally, you do not need to put the carrier piece in. It doesn't get dirty. It's more about the nibs and the collars and all that good stuff that go in there. These are really no different than the kind of ultrasonic cleaners you would use to clean jewelry. Okay, you just put it in there, you hit the on button, or in the case of the Statler white and blue ones, there's a little switch and away it goes, and it'll go for a certain amount of time. I generally think it's about an hour. And when you're done, you come back and there you go. It would actually be clean. You would fill it with just a teeny bit of cleaning fluid and warm water, and it will do the rest for you. And then you pull it out, rinse it all apart, and there you go. But again, generally you don't want to leave ink in these for more than 2 weeks. So there's no reason to put a lot of ink in generally, depending upon how much you're going to draw. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the technical pen. We'll cover some of the maintenance a little bit more when I actually have a pen in my hand and you're not just looking at these slides. Okay, so what do you do with a technical pen in the graphic design world? We no longer really need it for lines, okay? What we tend to use it for as an illustration tool. The most common thing for using a technical pen, or even some of these micron pens for, is something called stippling. Stippling is putting dots down, and the closer the dots are together, the darker it looks. And depending upon how fine your pen is or how big the artwork is, you can get pretty darn detailed. It can also be painful for some people because it's not a quick process. It is not a quick process because technical pens are designed to be perpendicular to the page. They're not designed to be at an angle. So you're going straight up and straight down when you're stippling because you don't want weird little squigglies that are called tadpoles. Okay, you want a perfect dot. So basically what you're kind of doing is creating a line screen by hand, by stippling. And you can see, here's some examples of cross-hatching as well as stippling. The further you get away from it, the smoother it looks. Sometimes they look really, really photorealistic. You can see, you can even do really interesting gradients with technical pens, and certainly some beautiful, beautiful illustrations. Very smooth, very refined. They used to be used a lot for clip art illustration, and they were also used extensively for scientific illustration. Okay, and hopefully you can pause this video at any point and take a closer look at any one's of these wonderful pieces of artwork that we're scrolling past. But now we're going to get into actually using a technical pen and it's going to be more of a demonstration than just looking at these slides. So here we go. All right, so now we're going to get to the more practical stuff. I'm actually going to demonstrate working with some of these technical pens. I have a variety of technical pens. This is a K&E Leroy. This is a really old brand. As you can see, it's got the blue indicators, which means that's the actual size nib that this one happens to be, because this nib itself is not actually color-coded. On normal tech pens, we can look at this one, which happens to be a Faber-Castell. This yellow one here actually has, it's yellow, which is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a specific color. This one happens to be a 0.35, also known as a zero pen. Okay. If I were to look at this one, this is red. Let's see if the inside is actually red. Yes, it is, and it is a 0.7 line, okay, which is a, I don't remember what that number means. And now let me see if this yellow one, okay, so here's the yellow one. This is a different brand, so the color or the size is actually a little bit different, but this is a different yellow as well. When you have that many different pens, you end up with that. But these are Rapidograph Koh-i-Noors. I believe these are the only ones still being manufactured today, is the Rapidograph Koh-i-Noor. If I were to order them into the bookstore, this is the brand I would get. Whenever I'm supplying for the school, I buy used or new old stock. Stadler, the Marsmatic 700s can take a lot of abuse. They're just a better pen to be using for this. And this is my first set of Faber-Castells. I haven't used these very much. This is a 00. But they seem to be a good solid pen. But I am kind of a fan of the Rapidographs. Right, so as far as technical pens are concerned, how do they work? How do we, so this is a nib. I'm actually going to put a pen together. I'm going to go through the whole process. This is the nib right here, this little guy. Okay, I'm going to pull it up a little bit closer so you can probably see just a little bit better. Okay, so this is a nib. This one happens to be, I'm going to have to take my glasses off for this one. This is a 0.5, I think. What does it say? I can't see the number anymore. But what you want to see all these little grooves right here. That's what I was talking about earlier. This is the channel that the air needs to get actually into the pen. So I'm going to go ahead and take the retaining cap off so you can see the plunger. I'm going to pull it out. Look at how fine that wire is. Okay, this is a plunger, and you have to be very, very careful when you put it back. That it goes exactly where it's supposed to go and you don't ruin the pen. Okay, and then I'm going to screw this back on. Okay, and then you rattle it. Yep, I can hear the rattle, which means it's clean. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put that in here, and I'm going to screw it down. And with this is not about proving how macho or how tough your grip is, okay? Because you have to get this thing back off at some point. So just a light, just a light movement, okay? Certainly you would never use a wrench, but I'm using the built-in wrench on the carrier here, okay? And so this is the end that the reservoir goes in, so it would go like right in there. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and fill this one. So I'm going to pull this out. Normally, technical pen ink comes in these things. Here's one that is unopened. Generally, they're in a plastic baggie when you get them. This is Black India ink. You can't use normal India ink unless it specifically says that it is for technical pens. This one says pen and ink, technical pens, and so on and so forth. But a lot of India ink is not. Okay, this one just happens to be. So normally it comes like this. It comes in different colors. It can come in brown, yellow, red, whatever. Comes in lots of different colors. Normally we use black. Okay. Now when you first open this up, when you first get it and you go ahead and open it up, you go ahead and you write the month and the year that you opened it. Because technical pen ink isn't good forever. Now, if you bought a used set of Koh-i-Noor or a used set of Stattlers online and it came with ink, go ahead and throw that ink away because that ink is already probably 20 years old. Throw it away. You don't want that in your pen. It's going to cause you all sorts of problems. Go buy some new ink. Do yourself a favor. But the ink is only supposed to be good for about a year. Okay, so we don't go around opening a whole bunch of them because this ink goes a really long ways. This one little thing of ink could probably do the whole class for the Word project. So it does not require a lot of ink to make anything happen. Okay, especially since you're only supposed to leave ink in for probably about 2 weeks at the most. Now, you want to put the ink in like you would if you were pouring a beer. Okay, you put it on the edge and you slightly squeeze. You do not need to fill the whole thing. Okay, you don't want to just flip this thing over and start squirting. Look, I already made a mess. Okay, that's what happens. Okay, you have to be super, super careful. And I did not plan ahead, and I do not have a rag to clean that up with. But you can see that it is not very full. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this on. Okay, and now with the Stattlers, it's just pressure that holds it in. And you can see it's not very full. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and screw it into here. And I'm going to screw it into the cap. Okay, and I'm just doing that because I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to use it a little bit later. I want to talk about some of these other ones. Like here's a Koh-i-Noor. Okay, it's got the same kind of ink. It's just these ones happen to have collars. The other hassle with these is the Koh-i-Noors require that you use a wrench. That's why if you were to go back and look at the Koh-i-Noor cleaning thing, it came with a little black screwy thing. That's actually the wrench for the Koh-i-Noors because as you can see, there isn't one in here. It's just the Germans thought it through just a little bit better. Okay. Now with the Faber-Castells, okay, they also require a wrench to go ahead and unscrew them. And there they also have the pressure fit reservoir. Okay, it does not have a collar. It's just got a pressure fit reservoir. And then this is the indicator of the ink or the pen size. Now inside of this cap, at the very top of it, bottom if I'm looking at it this way, there's a little teeny air pocket reservoir which is supposed to keep the tip dry. One of the things with a technical pen is the second you are done using it, you close it. Okay, you don't leave it sitting around like, okay, you know, I'm going to use that pen here in a couple minutes. Like, no, with these, you close that thing down. Okay, you put it away and all is well. Technical pens come with all sorts of wonderful accessories. This is if you want to, draw this way. Okay, which is, I think one of the images shows that particular drawing. It's actually been removed from the holder and put onto a different holder for working from a distance. Okay, does a decent job, and you can actually lock in the angle so that it stays a specific angle if you want to, or maybe you want to work on it that way. So lots of different ways that one works. We can also screw technical pens into compasses. Okay, so like if here's my compass. Okay. I can go ahead and screw it into the compass. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring the ends together because you want these ends to be at the same place. So I would probably need to bring the tip of my compass down a little bit. Just a little bit. And so now, you know, I could get a nice technical pen perfect line for a circle if I wanted to. Now, as you can see, I kind of... I'm a huge fan of Staedtler. It's a German brand. They made really, really good equipment, and you can see that my compass is that. These holders don't necessarily come with compasses. Mine happen to, but generally they have the pencil style holder in it, and that's what this thing is. Sometimes you have to buy these separately on your own, and you'll see them often have pictures or stickers, but there actually isn't anything in there underneath the sticker. It's just showing you what could go there if it wanted to, kind of thing. So don't assume that you got one if you have a sticker inside your Staedtler pen thing. Okay. So now I'm gonna actually transfer this letter, and we're gonna do this time, and then I'm gonna do it again when I get to my next video for you guys. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've made some corrections. Okay, this was my resized one. You can see that I've made some corrections on this thing. Okay, so this is my finished letter form. Okay, it is good to go. I would continue to maybe make some modifications. Top part of this R is too heavy, and I don't like how heavy these letters end up being. These uprights are far too heavy for a normal letter form. But I'm just going to run with it for now. Okay. So at this point, what you have to do is, once you have your perfect letter, and you've adjusted the position, and everything is super peachy, you have to create a way to transfer this to your board. Okay? Now with you guys, you're going to do the whole word at one time. All right? But I'm going to show that as a separate video. Right now, I'm just talking about doing this one letter. Okay? So what am I going to do is I am going to trace this letter one more time. Now I can trace it with pencil, I can trace it with pen, whatever you want to use. Okay? And so I'm going to go through and I'm going to trace this letter, and I certainly want to get rid of that weird little bump right there, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that in just a teeny bit. I'm doing this freehand. Boy, if I had an adjustable curve or French curves, I would be super happy. Okay. Oh, I should be using a straight edge. If you got a straight line, use a straight edge. Here we go. Boop. This will also make sure that your counter spaces line up properly. Okay. Okay. Doing this really fast. I don't want you guys to do it this fast. I just happen to be doing it this fast. Because I'm demonstrating technical pens, not necessarily the project that we're doing. This is fairly serendipitous to what we were doing. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've copied it. I've copied my good version of the letter. And so now I need to transfer it to what I'm going to use for this particular demonstration is cast coat. Okay. Cast coat is a ceramic coated paper that is really, really good for technical pens. So how do I go ahead and transfer it? First off, what I'm going to do is create carbon paper. Okay. Now, when you're creating carbon paper, be sure that you are when you end up pressing this thing, that you are pushing against something that isn't going to get ruined. I am not going to lay this down on my cast coat and make my carbon paper, or that's going to transfer this to my cast coats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over, okay, and I'm doing it on top of tracing paper. Wow, there's ink like everywhere. Okay, because I am not going to stop this video to clean up that ink right this second. Okay, now how do we do it? Well, since I don't have a pencil sharpener at home, I'm going to just use a standard 2HB pencil. And where there is carbon on the far side, or where I've traced on the far side of this sheet of tracing paper, I am going to put some carbon down. It doesn't need to be too heavy. Just enough so you can get it transferred. If you're doing really big, complicated illustrations, like you're maybe going to do some watercolor work and you have a very complicated drawing that has to be transferred, you can actually use this pencil, and then you take a cotton ball with a little bit of alcohol on it, and you can smear this carbon out even further, so that you don't have to put it on every single line. With this particular project, it's just as easy to go ahead and do it this way. There you go. Okay, so that's probably enough carbon to go ahead and transfer it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out some cast coat, and I'm going to transfer this. So I'm going to put my R down on here, and I'm going to tape it down. Okay. Now I'm going to pull out my mechanical pencil again. Do not press hard. Only press as much as needs to happen. If you press too hard, you're going to indent into your illustration board or into your cast coat, okay, which is going to create a crater that is going to cause problems later on. So you press just hard enough to make this stick. And I'll show you what it means, what I mean by stick. Okay. Now I'm just going through and doing all of these straight lines first. Okay, and then I'm going to do the horizontal lines. Don't press very hard. And I'm going to do the bottom, and then I'm going to do the curves. Now, on illustration board, it's great because you can erase. Cast coat doesn't like erasing. It's just the nature of the beast. Because it's ceramic coated, it just doesn't like it very much. But the illustration board is fine with it. In fact, illustration board will allow you to lift Technical Pen back up if you're really good. You can do it a little bit with the cast coat, but not as much as you'd like to be able to. And the best illustration board I've found is Arch's illustration board for actually transferring that stuff. Okay. Now, you don't pull it up completely because you don't know if for sure that you got all your lines in. Okay, so I'm just going to lift up this just a teeny bit and make sure that all my lines are in. Yep, there they are. Okay, so all my lines are done. It transferred very well to this particular thing. Okay, so now it's time to pull out my Technical Pen. Now, cast coat and illustration boards don't like human oil. Okay. And so most of the time you will want to have something to rest your hand on because, well, just because, all right? Because otherwise you're going to be putting oil all over stuff. And that's generally not a good idea. This is the Technical Pen I just filled earlier. Okay. got ink all over the place. It's going to cause a problem. I know it is. Sometimes you have to go, a little bit of shaking with the pen. Generally, you want to have a scrap that you can actually start drawing on. Sometimes you need to go like this, actually. Seems like, oh, this isn't the pen I was working with. Where did the pen go that I was working with? Oh, there it is. I screwed up. And grabbed the wrong pen. I'm going to try to get the ink going. Normally, when you're doing PEC pen, like I said, you have a scrap piece of paper that you start on just to get the ink flowing. Trying to get the air in and the ink down. You also want to make sure that those channels are allowing air to come through. There we go. Okay. So now I have my technical pen. Everything is great and everything is working the way it's supposed to. So this is the reason that rulers and triangles have this weird little groove, is so that you can do things like this. Okay? You couldn't do this unless you had that groove. Okay? Now I've got ink all over this. How did ink get on there? Okay, well, we'll just drive on. Okay? Now you need to be sure that you don't ink over the same places that you already inked over. Here I go. This is the nerve-wracking part because there's really no going back. There's no mercy in a technical pen. And now remember, I told you earlier, okay, the pen is supposed to be perpendicular. Okay. You'll notice my hand is actually now sitting on this thing, which you shouldn't be doing because Cascode is very, very sensitive to things like that. But I know if I move the tracing paper in, I'm going to have problems. You're not pushing hard. The ink comes out all by itself. You can remember that this is all going to be blacked out. So if you want to start over here, you can. Or if you want to kind of do this to get your curves, you can. Whatever it takes to make you happy and make your illustration as perfect as possible. This is, again, where it would be very, very handy to have an adjustable curve or a French curve to give me a good true curve. They're as handy as having a straight edge. Okay. I'm going to do this guy up here. And I'm going to do this one on the bottom. Okay. Got it. See, things move. It's so bad. All right. Now, when you're inking things like this, I only did the outlines, and then I will actually use the pen along here to get these edges so that I can use a much heavier pen on the inside. or I can actually use India ink and a brush, which is what I'm going to do here in a second. Scares the crap out of people because you're dumping a bunch of ink on top of a thing that you've taken a lot of time to create, especially once you've transferred your entire Remy word. You're going to be kind of picky about, and you're going to be a little bit nerve-wracked because you've only got so many illustration boards, so you can't screw it up too many times before things are bad. But as you can tell, because these pens are so fine, it would be insane to try to fill in the space with this tiny pen. When you're trying to fill in space with a technical pen, generally it's a good idea to make little circles. This will also work with Sharpies or anything else. That way you're sure to get all the coverage you need. Okay, stippling. That is stippling right there, just so you can see what it looks like. Okay, this is actually a pretty thick pen, so this illustration would have to be fairly large in order to get some detail in there. Okay, but that's stippling. And then cross-hatching is simply doing this to create texture. So like if I was trying to create texture over here, I could do that. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and do this entire thing this way, because that would be really, 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 really painful. But I'm going to get to a point here where I'm going to go ahead and stop, and I'm going to pull out the India ink and a brush to fill this in. The nice thing about a technical pen is that it is black. Okay, there's no way around it. It is not kind of gray. It is black, 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 black. And that's one of the reasons you have to be careful about the ink, is because the pigment that's in it is what's going to plug the pen up, especially if you have something like a 5/0, which is a very, very, very fine pen. It doesn't take anything to bend it or ruin it. I've gone through about 4 of those because it just doesn't take anything, and they have to be cleaned constantly in order to work properly. Okay, so I'm done. I'm going to close that up, stick it up here. I do have some really, really fat ones. Like here is I think it's a 1. Oh, it's a 2. Okay, so it's a 2-point line. That's a really, I could fill this whole space with that if I wanted to. But I wanted to demonstrate this thing. I'm going to pull out my, this one, I think it's Sable. Okay, this is one of my watercolor brushes. Here's the India ink. I'm going to shake this really good. Okay, because I'm going to fill in this space. Now, these have eyedroppers, which is kind of cool. But again, there's no mercy here. Okay, no mercy. And I'm going to put this in here like this. And with Cascode, it doesn't matter because it's not going to absorb the ink. It cannot absorb the ink. It simply can't do it. It's ceramic. Ceramic doesn't absorb ink. And so then once it's on here, you just kind of push it around. And you can also do this with illustration board. And if you're feeling really saucy, you could crumb up right up to the edges. Cascode doesn't like the brush as much as the illustration board does. You can see that it's kind of like, I just flick the brush. And so, doesn't matter how much ink. I did put too much ink on here, and I flicked and I've caused stains, and now you know why it's not really a lot of fun. But you can put on as many layers as you need to get that nice rich black. And once it dries, all those blacks will match. Because this used to be the way that we would make logos and everything, is with, you know, technical pens and brushes and scratch off letters and all sorts of weird stuff, and then we would take this to a camera. And so the subtleties in the black wouldn't matter because the camera wouldn't pick it up. Okay, because what we would do is we would create the font or the logo at 300% size and then shrink it down on the camera, and all the irregularities would just vanish because it was, when it was shrunk, it would be just fine. So basically what you guys are doing is creating camera-ready art. And the way I used to check this assignment would be to put it on a photocopier and see how it went. Anyway, there's no point in me finishing this. Okay, but so that's technical pens. They're really, really kind of fun things. I really like technical pens. I love doing technical pen illustration. I love the precision of them. They are just super nice to use. Let's see. You know, you can have all sorts of fun with these. Yeah, Snoopy should have had a better ridge. Would have been more like that. Anyway, technical pens. They're really, really handy. There's lots of different brands. I'm a Staedtler snob, but I have been pretty happy with these Faber-Castells and the way they perform. Okay, technical pens. Okay, don't keep the ink around forever. Technical pens do have white, okay, so they can do opaque. All right, technical pens can do gold. If you can find gold ink that's pigment, will work okay. Generally, it's going to have to be a fatter pen because the pigment is so big that it can plug a normal pen. Okay. And so that is our demonstration with technical pens. And so there's going to be a separate video for finishing your project. All right. You guys have a great day. Have fun technical pen drawing.